Hi, my name is Dr. Tania Lim. I'm Singapore Discipline Lead of Media and Communication at Murdoch University, Singapore.
Hi, I'm Margareta Anastasia and I graduated from Murdoch in 2018. I'm currently heading the marketing and product innovation efforts at Hake, a Singapore headquartered startup that produces plant-based egg products.
Hi, my name is Associate Professor Renae Desai. I'm the Dean of the School of Media and Communication at Murdoch University. I'm a Fellow of the Public Relations Institute of Australia and I lead the discipline of communication in Perth, Singapore and Dubai.
One of the things that organizations need is always a very good way to sense the environment. Right? The environment plays a big role in how you interact with your customers, with audiences to some extent. And using tools like Hofstede's model of culture actually helps you to analyze who you're speaking to. And this applies across all kinds of industries. The creative industries in particular, in advertising we see a huge emphasis and use of analytical use of culture as well.
I think it's interesting that Tania mentioned about Hofstede because it's indeed like a very useful framework to be used. But I think like going beyond that, right? Hofstede allows you to see kind of like the overview of like the person or the society you're talking to. That's why it's important for you to really understand like what culture actually means and what kind of dominant culture elements that actually affect the person you're talking to.
From a communications perspective, when we're looking at avoiding conflict or dealing with conflict in communication environments, in organisations, as well as globally on an international scale, we have to remember that we're talking about human beings. Communication in the end is about human beings. But conflict is a human interaction. It's not something that just occurs for no reason. And in communication, we're there to understand the underlying reasons for conflict and then provide a framework to move through conflict, through mediation, through interpersonal communication, through mass communication. If we're talking about national culture, cultural identity, media culture, there's all sorts of things that go into this term culture that can then lead to conflict.
Well, we know that different audiences will come from different lenses, cultural lenses. So we need to be able to, in a way, use different tools, right, to understand where they're coming from in order to communicate with them. So looking at things like design thinking, right, to some extent, can be a really useful process for us to understand the audience a lot more. And use that as one of the best practices, and many companies are using that as well. Even in communication practice, we do some of that. It's quite integral into this process. And I think in today's world, the way that we interact with users, the way we interact with our audiences, changes based on our context, on which media that we use to some extent, and also who we are actually trying to bond with. Because now it's all about community, right? It's all about developing group identities that are linked to communities. And they can be online and offline, right, in many different ways. So that's certainly much of the practice that you see in many of the different media organizations that are very successful today.
Okay, first and foremost, you have to keep up to the trends. You have to understand like what's the current nuance. Like for example, if you say certain word, maybe like back then, like 10 years ago and like now, people nowadays can interpret it differently because of like changes and evolution of society. But not only that, I guess like what is very interesting to me is that, like now with the presence of social media, when you talk to someone out there, for example, like you are a brand and then like you decide to post something on your social media, hey, you're talking to like the global audience there. You're not just talking to like a certain audience with a certain demographics, right? So you have to be, first and foremost, culturally intelligent. And what it means is that, for example, when we talk about messages, there are also hidden meanings behind messages. And the use of semiotics is actually very helpful in this case. Talk to them, don't think that you know everything, like especially as a brand. I think you have to be humble, to have that humility, to really like speak to people heart to heart.
Now we are seeing a trend throughout the world, in strategic communication particularly, organisations investing time and even money, which is good to see, into good evidence-based research in order to understand those audiences before spending money on message delivery and content development. It sounds like it's something we should be doing all the time, but it simply isn't, and it's mostly because of time. Not necessarily because of expertise. We want to get to the end game very quickly, but we really can't afford to do that anymore. Audiences are too sophisticated. Content creators are able to produce content on a much faster basis, especially with the emergence of AI going into the future. And it means that research is even more important than it was before. So we can hit the mark, we can give people and audiences what they're seeking authentically, which I think is a really important term to consider in today's communication environment.
And with that, thank you for joining us today for this discussion. Have a great day ahead.